Okay guys, now today we are going to learn another important accounting standard, which is what we call borrowing cost. Okay, right. So this standard is LKS 23. Right, now we are going to learn LKAS 23 accounting standard. Right. Now look at the name of the accounting standard here. Right, the name of the accounting standard is borrowing cost. Borrowing cost. Okay, let's try to figure it out. What is the meaning of this? Right. What do we know about borrowings? අපි borrowings කියලා කියන්නේ මොකද්ද සාමාන්‍යයෙන්? අපි borrow කරනවා. මම මෙයාගෙන් borrow කරා. Right? I borrowed from a bank. I borrowed from my friend. අපි borrow කරනවා කියලා කියන්නේ ණයට ගන්නවා කියන එක. So the simple meaning of borrowing is what we call the lending or the debt. ණය. Right. අපිට තේරෙනවා කියොත් ණය. Right? Borrowing. Cost එක කියලා කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? පිරිවැයනේ, right? The cost. Okay. So borrowing is about your debt, your lendings, ණය, cost, පිරිවැය. Now what is the cost of a loan? What is the cost of a lending? What is the cost of a debt? ණයක තියෙන පිරිවැය. අපි මේකට හරි සරලව කියනවා මේකට සිංහලෙන් අපි කියන්නේ ණය ගැනුම් පිරිවැය කියලා, right? ණය ගැනුම් පිරිවැය. So in simple terms, borrowing cost is about, you all know this one, interest. Borrowing cost is about interest. ණයක තියෙන පිරිවැය පොලියනේ ළමයි. ණයක තියෙන පිරිවැයට අපි කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? පොලිය. Right? So simply the borrowing cost is about interest. So it's about how we are going to account for interest. මේ interest අපි කොහොමද account කරන්නේ? How we are going to account for this interest. Interest කොහොමද ගෙනුම් තියන්නේ? If I ask you this typical question, you all know, you might think even, why really do we need an accounting standard for this interest cost? Right? So what is the simple thing? Now whenever you have taken a loan, for an example, let's say you have taken a loan of 1 million and the interest rate is at 10%. Right? So let's say the interest cost will come to 100,000. Interest cost will come to 100,000 per annum. If somebody asks, okay, how we are going to account for this interest? You will simply say, okay, interest is an expense now. So the accounting part, interest expense will be debited to the interest expense, credited to either cash or interest payable. Cash or interest payable. That will be the simple answer, right? Interest is an expense, you charge it to profit or loss, right? So when you take a loan, you are supposed to pay interest. Interest is an expense, you charge it to profit or loss, right? That's the simplest accounting method. Now why do we need an accounting standard for this, right? Now there's a reason, right? Now this is the typical accounting treatment, charging the interest expense to the profit or loss. But there are certain exceptions. සාමාන්‍ය ගිණුම්කරණය තමයි පොලිය වියදමක් විදිහට ලාභ ගිණුමට අය කරන එක. හැබැයි ඒකට වෙනස් වෙන තැන් ටිකක් එනවා. Right? That is what we are going to focus on in this accounting standard. ඒ කියන්නේ P&L එකට charge කරන්නේ නැතුව ඉන්න තැන් කීපයක් තියෙනවා. That is what we are going to learn here. Okay? Right. So borrowing cost is a standard we are going to learn. Right. Now generally, even though I said borrowing cost refers to interest, there are few other elements included in the borrowing cost. Right. Now we will look at, you know what is borrowing cost? It's simply about the interest. Borrowing cost mainly, like we know, it includes the interest. That's true. Interest is there. Other than the interest, there are two other elements. මේ interest එකට අමතරව තව items දෙකක් විතර ඔය borrowing cost කියනකොට අපි ගන්නවා. What is the next item? The next item is the lease interest or the lease charge. Now when you take a lease, you are supposed to pay the lease interest, no? අපි leasing facility එකක් ගත්තොත් එහෙම lease installment එකක් ඇතුලේ පොලියකුත් තියෙනවානේ. When you take a asset on a lease facility, වත්කමක් ගන්නවා කල්බදු පහසුකමක් යටතේ. You are supposed to pay the lease interest. කල්බදු පොලියක් ගෙවන්න දෙපේ. That is also part of the borrowing cost. The lease interest is also a part of the borrowing cost. Okay? Then what is the final item? Now we have learned about two elements. One is the basic, the most important thing is interest, then the lease interest. Then sometimes we might take some foreign loans, right? You might take some foreign loans. Now, for an example, let's say you have obtained a loan. You have obtained a loan of $100,000. You have obtained a loan of $100,000. By the time you obtain the loan, Sri Lankan rupee, right? It was at $1 was equal to LKR. For an example, let's say 200. By the time you obtain the loan, per dollar LKR value is 200. At the time of settlement, අපි તો මේ loan එක දැන් settle කරන්න යනවා කියලා. At the time of settlement, the LKR per dollar LKR value went up to 300. So the rupee got depreciated. Rupee ki value එක අඩු වුණා. So it went up to 300. Now per dollar you are paying extra 100 rupees. Dollar එකකට වැඩිපුර රුපියල් 100 ගානේ මේ ඩොලර් ගානට ගෙවනවා. Now that is an exchange loss, right? Exchange loss. So when you are taking a foreign currency loan, guys, right? At the point of settlement, because of the currency appreciation or depreciation, right? There can be foreign exchange differences. There can be foreign exchange differences. So such foreign exchange differences are also part of your borrowing cost. Foreign exchange differences are also part of the borrowing cost. So simply interest cost, the lease interest and the foreign exchange differences on borrowings is what we consider as the borrowing cost. Okay, right. I hope the basics you are clear with. What is the borrowing cost? The interest, the lease interest and the forex differences, foreign exchange differences. Clear? Right. Okay, right. Now we are moving on to an important question that we are going to do, right? Now we'll see that what we have learned, are we really through with this, right? Look here. Now you have to state whether the following items are borrowing costs or not. Right, we'll look at the first one. Interest on loan obtained from a State Bank of China. What do you think? Interest on loan, right? So typically it's a borrowing cost, no worries at all. Interest from a fixed deposit made in Sampath Bank. Now always remember we are talking about the borrowing cost. So that should be the interest on borrowings, interest on loans. If it is a fixed deposit, you are getting an interest income, not an interest expense. So you can't be considering the income part here, no, right? So for the second item, it is a no. Leasing interest on a lease obtained from LB Finance, obviously yes. You can go through. Lawyer fee incurred on obtaining the loan, no, right? We didn't came across any lawyer fees or any other thing. Nope, it's not a borrowing cost. Interest on debentures issued, yeah, borrowing can be a debenture, borrowing can be a preference share, right? Borrowing can be a mortgage loan, project loan, working capital loan, right? It can be anything, right? So your type of the borrowing can be anything, right? So the debenture issued, yes, that's a borrowing cost. Foreign exchange gain arising on settling a foreign currency loan. Foreign exchange gain. And the last item is a foreign exchange loss on settling a foreign currency loan. So that you know, definitely it's part of the borrowing cost. How about a gain? Foreign exchange gain. Right? What do you think? Look here. It says, the standard says foreign exchange differences, right? It doesn't specifically says foreign exchange losses. So there can be a situation where it has a gain event, still you have to factor that under the borrowing cost. So this is also part of it, right? Okay, right. Now, right guys, like I told you, the typical accounting treatment for borrowing cost would be to charge it to profit or loss. That's a typical or the basic accounting treatment. I told you at the beginning that accounting treatment for borrowing cost differs on a separate type of assets. මම කියන්නේ මේ සාමාන්‍ය ගිණුම් කරන ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය වෙන්නේ ලාභ ලාභ ගිණුමට දාන එකනේ පොලිය. හැබැයි එහෙම නොවන අවස්ථා තියෙනවා. ලාභ ලාභ කියනකොට දාන්න නැති අවස්ථා තියෙනවා. Right? Now that is something we have to learn. Right? That is something we have to learn. Right? So we are going to learn about this special type of assets called qualifying assets. අපි මේකට සිංහලෙන් කියනවා සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කම් කියලා. Right? මොනවාට හරි qualify වෙන asset එකක්. Right? අපි මොනවද බලමු මේ qualify වෙන්නේ කියලා. හරිද? Right? Qualifying assets. Qualifying assets. There are special type of assets which we call the qualifying assets. සාමාන්‍ය වත්කම් වර්ගයක් තියෙනවා මේ සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කම් කියලා ටිකක් විශේෂ වර්ගයක වත්කම් ටිකක්. මොනවද මේ විශේෂ වර්ගයේ සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කම්? What are these qualifying assets? It's very easy. It's not difficult. If a particular asset takes substantial period of time, if a particular asset takes substantial period of time to get ready for its intended use or sale. If a particular asset is taking substantial period of time to get ready for its intended use or sale. Right. Now look at the picture here. I have given you a picture now. Now you can see there's a construction going on. Building එකක් හැදෙනවා. Right? There's a construction going on. Now we typically knows that a construction will take a bit of a time period to complete, isn't it? අපි building එකක් හදන්නේ ළමයි එක්ක පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ නැත්නම් විකුණන්නනේ. We construct a building either to use it or to sell it. Right? We create a machine either to use it or to sell it. We create a software either to use it or to sell it. Right? We manufacture an inventory item either to use it or sell it. Right? So typically sell it like that. So when it comes to an asset, there are basically two things. Either you are going to use it, either you are going to sell it. වත්කමක් ගත්තාම අපි එක්ක එක පාවිච්චි කරනවා නැත්නම් විකුණනවා. Now for you to create that asset, for you to invent that asset, for you to develop that asset, for you to construct that asset, it will take a time period නේ. ඔයාට ඒ වත්කම නිර්මාණය කරන්න, ඉදි කරන්න ඔයාට යම්කිසි කාලයක් ගත වෙනවානේ. What we are looking at is the time factor. How long will it take? නේ ඒකේ නිර්මාණය කරන්න කොච්චර කාලයක් ගත වේද? Is it a small time period or a substantial time period? For you to construct, for you to create, for you to develop, for you to invent that asset, does it take a substantial period of time? Generally, substantial period of time is no, as a norm, as a practice, we consider it to be like 6 months. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මාස 6ක් විතර කියලා තමයි ගන්න. Right? If a particular asset takes 6 months to get ready, the building එක හදන්න මාස 6කට වඩා යනවා. machine එක හදන්න මාස 6කට වඩා යනවා. ඒ plane එක manufacture කරන්න මාස 6කට වඩා යනවා. ඒ software එක හදන්න මාස 6කට වඩා යනවා. So like that, if a particular asset is taking a substantial period of time, we say that asset is a qualifying asset. Okay? If asset takes substantial period of time to get ready for its intended use or sale, we say it's a qualifying assets. අපි ඒකට කියනවා ඒක සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කමක් කියලා. හරිද? Let's take some examples. අපි පොඩි උදාහරණ කිහිපයක් බලමු. Typically a property, plant and equipment, a building, a flat maybe, a hotel maybe, a bridge maybe, a highway maybe, right? So a housing maybe, buildings, condominium properties, highways, bridges. This generally takes more than 6 months. And there can be intangible assets such as softwares, patents. Sometimes for you to develop patent, it will take time. Can you remember when we were hit with COVID? It took nearly 1 year to develop the vaccine, right? So it's an intellectual property. It took like 1 year. Right? After the testing and everything, it will take time. It will take time, right? Intangible assets. And investment properties, right? There can be investment properties like buildings for the rental purpose if you are keeping. Inventory, right? Certain inventories are even there which are taking more than 6 months, right? Now for an example, if you are a ship manufacturer or a vessel manufacturer, ඔයා නැව් හදන කෙනෙක් නම් නැවක් හදන්න මාසයකට වඩා යනවනේ. Now a ship is your inventory, right? ඔයා හදන නැව් ටික වගේ තොගයක්, but it will take more than 6 months. If you are an airplane manufacturer, ඔයා plane එකක් හදන මිනිස්සෙක් නම් it will take more than 6 months, but that is your inventory. Even an inventory can take substantial period of time. Not all the inventories, right? There can be a situation, right? Hari. Now we know that these items are qualifying assets. Qualifying assets, right? Okay. We'll do an example question, right? Determine whether following assets are qualifying assets or not. මේ දීලා තියෙන වත්කම් සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කම්ද නැද්ද කියලා කියන්න කියලා කියනවා. Right. We'll see. We'll look at the first one. Plant purchased on plant කියලා කියන්නේ පිරියතයක් කියන එක. කියන්නේ යන්ත්‍රාගාරයක් වගේ. Plant purchased on 1st of April 2016. Installation was completed on 23rd August 2017. So it's taking more than 1 year, right? More than 1 year. Therefore, it's yes. It's a qualifying asset. Software development project commenced on 1st of Jan. Completed on 3rd of September. 3rd of September. Yes, more than 6 months. Yes, qualifying asset. Inventory of the company, general manufacturing period is around 1 month. No, 1 month we don't consider. Engineering items inventory which takes around 8 months to get ready for its intended use. Yes, 8 months, yes. Building construction project expected completion period is 1 year. Yes, more than 6 months now. Yes. Acquired bare land future use has not been determined. If you haven't determined the future use, then you can't take. ඔයාගේ future use එකට get ready වෙනකල් period එක නේ බලන්නේ. Right. So these items you can consider as qualifying assets. Right, qualifying assets. Then අපි මේ මොකද්ද මේ සිද්ධිය කියන එක චුට්ටක් බලමුකෝ. මේ දැන් qualifying assets කියනවා. ඒක මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ කියලා. Right, we'll take. Okay guys, now look here. I hope you have heard of this concept called matching. ඔයා අහලා තියෙනවා මේ matching කියන concept එක. අපි මේකට කියනවා ගැලපුම් සංකල්පය කියලා. What happens in matching concept? You are going to match the revenue with the relevant expenses. You are going to match the revenue with the relevant expenses. That is what we call the matching concept. Right. Now this whole accounting standard is developed based on the matching concept. Matching concept. Right. We'll take 2 types of loans. අපි ගමුකෝ මේ business එකක් තියෙනවා ABC කියලා. There's a business called ABC. ABC has taken 2 loans. One particular loan is 1 million at an interest rate of 10%. There's another loan. This is the first loan. මෙතන පළවෙනි loan එක, මෙතන second loan එක. That is also 1 million at an interest rate of 10%. At an interest rate of 10%. Right? 10%. Okay. Now this particular loan was taken to construct a building. අපි හිතමු මේක ගත්තේ building එකක් construct කරන්න කියලා. Construct a building. Right? And it is taking 9 months to construct the building. Right? Now this particular loan was taken to manage the working capital. මේක ගත්තේ ඔයාගේ working capital එක manage කරන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයාගේ ඔය inventory ටික ඔයාගේ creditors ලා settle කරන්න like that. And the working capital cycle is 2 months. ගත්තේ 2 months වලට. For an example. Right? Okay. Now if you look at, right, now this building part guys, building part for an example, right, now if you look at the period starting from 0 up to 9 months, මාස 9ක් යනකම්, right, this building is under the construction, no, right. Now from 0, from the starting date up to the end of this 9th month, building is under the construction. So under the construction means you can't use it. ඔයාට මේ building එක පාවිච්චි කරන්න හැකියාවක් නැහැ. You can't use the building. You can't use the building. Right? But every month you will be having an interest expense නේ. ඔයාට interest එකක් වදිනවනේ හැම මාසෙම. Right? For an example, the interest cost per month. අපි බලමුකෝ නිකන් මාසෙකට interest එක කොච්චරක් එයිද කියලා. Right? It will come to like 8,000 something no. දැන් මේකේ අවුරුද්දෙම interest එක එනවා 100,000 10%. ඔක 12න් බෙදුවාම 8,300ක් විතර වගේ එනවා. Even for this one the interest will be 100,000. Right? So every month there will be an interest. මේ හැම මාසෙම ඔයාට interest එකක් එනවා 8,300ක කොහොම එනවා. හැම මාසෙම එනවා. But during this 9 months period you don't have any return from that building, you don't have any revenue from that building නේ. building එකෙන් වට ප්‍රතිලාභයක් නැහැ නේ ළමයි. ඇයි? During that 9 month period building was under the construction. building එක construction එකේ හිටියේ. Right? It was under the construction. So it does not generate any revenue. ඒකෙන් ආදායමක් උත්පාදනය කරන්න බෑ. ප්‍රතිලාභයක් ගන්න බෑ. Right? ඔයා මේ building එක rent out කරන්න හිතාගෙන ඉන්නවා කියලා හිතන්න. So you are not getting anything නේ. Right? So if you look at, you don't have any revenue. Revenue එකක් නැහැ මේ මාස 9ට. But there will be an expense නේ. ඔයාට interest expense එකක් එනවා. That is against matching නේ. Matching කිව්වේ revenue එකට expense එක match කරන්න කියලානේ. Right? Matching concept asks you to match the revenue versus expenses. Now here for 9 months you don't have a revenue but you have an interest expense which is not matching. Right? Which is not matching. At the same time if you look at the working capital කියන්නේ business එක දුවන එක. Inventory වගේ creditor debtor ඔය ටික අපි working capital කියලා කියන්නේ. Your current asset versus current liabilities no. So your inventory sale and everything every month, right, this is generating your revenue. මේකෙන් දැන් ඔයාලට හැම මාසෙම revenue වෙනවා. අපි හැම මාසෙම ඔයාලට revenue එකක් එනවා කියලා 20,000. Now let's say every month you are getting a revenue. And you have an interest expense of 8,300 per month. Now this is matching no. By sale of the inventory, right, you are generating an income every month 20,000. වාගේ මේ තියෙන working capital cycle එකේදී මාස දෙකෙන් දෙකට හැම මාසෙම වාට revenue එකක් generate වෙනවා. Right? You are generating an income frequently. වා හැම මාසික වාට ආදායමක් ගලාගෙන එනවා. And you have an interest expense. So that is matching නේ. Revenue versus expense, it is matching. But here it doesn't match. For 9 months we don't have a revenue, but you are trying to charge the interest expense to the profit or loss. It is not matching. So then there's something that we can do. එහෙනම් අපිට පොඩ්ඩක් මොකක් හරි කරන්න පුළුවන්. මොකක්ද අපි කරන්නේ? දැන් මේ building එක has a cost of 1 million නේ. ඔයා මේ ලක්ෂ 10ක් වේදම් කරලා හදන building එකනේ. Right? For 9 months it's construction no. Right? This 9 months interest. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ 8,300 ගානේ මාස 9ක්. Right? 9 months interest. Right? 9 months interest. It will come to 75,000 නේ. 8,333 ගානේ මාස 9ක් කියලා කියන්නේ 75,000ක් එනවා. Now the interest for the construction period මේ ගොඩනැගිල්ල හදාගෙන යන කාලේදී අපිට ප්‍රතිලාභයක් නැහැනේ. ඒ කාලේ interest එක P&L එකට charge කරනවා වෙනුවට instead of charging that to P&L, right? Now what we earlier did was debited to interest expense, we have credited to cash. අපි සල්ලි වලින් ගෙවුවයි කියලා හිතන්න credited to cash. Now instead of charging that to P&L, we can capitalize that to asset itself. අපිට ඒක P&L එකට charge කරන්නේ නැතුව මේ මාස 9ට මේ building එක හැදෙනකන් this 75,000 can be capitalized to the building. ඔන්න එතකොට building එකේ value එක යනවා 1,75,000කට. Right? 1,75,000. Right? Now once again look at one building is there. It is taking 9 months to construct. At the same time there's a working capital loan. So working capital loan, you are generating the revenue and the expense, it's matching. ආදායම වෙනවා වියදම් කරනවා ආදායම වෙනවා වියදම් කරනවා. But here for 9 months you don't have any income but you have an interest expense. So it's not matching. ඒක match වෙන්නේ නැහැ. So what we are trying to do is, instead of charging that to profit or loss, we took that and we capitalized that to the asset. Capitalize කරනවා කියලා කියන්නේ වත්කමට එකතු කරනවා කියන එක. We added that to the asset. වත්කමට එකතු කරනවා. Now nice. එතකොට ඊට පස්සේ මොකද වෙන්නේ? Thereafter guys, now this is the cost of the building නේ දැන්. You are going to depreciate නේ. අපි તો මේක අවුරුදු 10කින් depreciate වෙනවායි කියලා. Right? So you are going to charge 1,107,500 as depreciation. හරිද? ඔයා depreciation විදියට annually charge කරනවා 107,500. Now you can see the capitalized borrowing cost. ඔයා වත්කමට එකතු කරපු borrowing cost will be charged to profit or loss. Will be charged to profit or loss as depreciation over the useful life. එතකොට අපි මේ වත්කමට එකතු කරපු interest එක P&L එකට hit වෙනවා share ඇතුලේ through depreciation. Now you are charging the depreciation over the useful life නේ. මේ building එකෙන් වට ප්‍රතිලාභ ලැබෙන කාලය පුරාවටනේ අපි depreciate කරන්නේ. Right? Assets are depreciated over the useful life where you are getting the economic benefits. Building එකෙන් වට ප්‍රතිලාභ හම්බෙන්නේ අවුරුදු 10ක් නම් ඔයා ඒක share කරනවා අවුරුදු 10ක. ඒතර මේ මාස 9 interest එක වට ප්‍රතිලාභෙන අවුරුදු 10ට කැපිලා යනවා. Right? Now that is what we are trying to achieve here. Clear? Right? So if an asset is taking a substantial period of time, වත්කමක් නිර්මාණය වෙන්න සැලකිය යුතු කාලයක් යනවා නම්, then the interest for that particular time period, ඒ කාලයට අදාළ පොලිය නිර්මාණය වෙන්න ගත වෙන කාලයේදී construction එකට ගත වෙන කාලය, the interest for that construction period, interest for that creation period, right, rather than charging it to profit or loss, capitalize that to the asset. ඒක වත්කමට එකතු කරන්න. Thereafter you can charge it to the profit or loss through depreciation. Right? Or take a share හරහා P&L එකට charge කරන්න පුළුවන්. So that you meet matching. Right? So you will be able to match the revenue and the expenses. Right? That's the simplest idea of borrowing cost. Right? Borrowing cost. So the entire borrowing cost accounting standard is based on the matching concept. It's based on the matching concept. So the term qualifying asset, sudusukam labana for what? To capitalize the borrowing cost. You are getting qualified to capitalize the borrowing cost. ණය පිරිවැය ප්‍රාග්ධනිත කිරීම සඳහා තමයි සුදුසුකම් ලබන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ හැදෙන්න කල් යනවා නම් ඒ කියන්නේ පොඩ revenue expense mismatch එකක් යනවනේ. එහෙනම් ඒ period එකට cost එක interest cost එක අපි asset එකට එකතු කරමු. That's the whole idea. Are we clear? Right. So right, I gave you a briefing about the concept. Right, now we'll move on to the nitty-gritties. Right, okay, the recognition of borrowing cost. Recognition of borrowing cost. Now guys, right, we divide the borrowing cost into two types. One is for the qualifying assets, borrowing cost on qualifying assets and other. එගනේ මේ සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කම් මත ඇතිවන පොලියයි අනික් පොලිය. Right, borrowing cost on the qualifying assets and other. What will happen to the other? That will be charged to profit or loss. Right? Other එක profit or loss එකට charge කරනවා. Borrowing cost on the qualifying assets will be capitalized. Like I told you, capitalize කරනවා කියලා කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? You are adding that to the asset. Adding that to the asset. Capitalize කරනවා කියන වචනේ තේරුම තමයි වත්කමට එකතු කරනවා කියන එක. Right? So borrowing cost on qualifying assets you are going to capitalize. Borrowing cost on the other assets, again අනික් ඒවා ඔය මාස 6ක් ගත වෙන්නේ නැති ඒවා ටික just charge it to P&L. Right. Now when you are trying to capitalize the borrowing cost, you need to look at the nature of the loan. ඒ loan එකේ හැටි පොඩ්ඩක් බලන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? තමයි there can be two different types of loans, two different types of borrowings. ඒ කියන්නේ borrowings වර්ග දෙකක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. There can be two different types of borrowings. Right? There can be two different types of borrowings. Right? Now one type is what we call the specific funds. Other one is what we call the general pool of funds. There are two types of borrowings. One is the specific funds. Other one is the general pool of funds. මොකක්ද ඒ කියන්නේ? මෙහෙමයි. We'll take the specific funds. let me give you an example. Let's say, for an example, we'll take Haley's. Now, Haley's wants to construct a building in town hall. A town hall, they have a land, so they want to construct a huge building. Now, what they are going to do is, they are going to approach a bank. Let's say they have approached Hatton National Bank. Haley's has gone to Hatton National Bank and asked, look here, we want to construct a building in this land, right? This is the deed of the land. This is the approved plan. This is the BOQ given by the contractor. So we need a loan of 5 billion rupees, right? So the HNB will say, HNB will look at, okay, this particular land has this much of value. These are the BOQs and everything. So we are going to give a loan specifically to construct the building. Hatton National Bank is giving a loan to Haley's to specifically to construct the building. What is the objective of that loan? HNB එක 5 billion දුන්නේ අය Haley's එකට to construct the building. Can Haley's use it to some other purpose? අපි salary ටික ගෙවන්න ගත්තා. නේ එහෙම කරන්න බෑ. So the bank is also monitoring. The objective of that loan is to utilize those funds for the construction. Now, if a loan is being given to a specified objective, if a loan is given to a specific purpose, then we say it's a specific fund. ඒක දීලා තියෙන ඒක කරන්න. ඔයාට loan එක දෙන්නේ මේ ගොඩනැගිල්ල හදන්න. ඔයාට loan එක දෙන්නේ මේ software එක හදන්න. ඔයාට loan එක දෙන්නේ මේ machine එක ගන්න. Like that. Then we say it's a specific fund. At the same time, there's another type of loans which is what we call the general pool of funds. Now, pool of funds means sometimes the business entity may have approved certain general loan facilities. Business එක සමහර ලාවට general loan facilities approve කරලා තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. අපි තමු සමහර OD එකක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. They have taken funds from the debenture issues. They have obtained funds from the preferential issues. They have obtained certain generic loan facilities. අපි හිතමු දැන් Haley's එක debenture issue එකක් කරලා ගත්ත සල්ලි තියෙනවා. Haley's එක preferential issue එකක් කරලා ගත්ත සල්ලි තියෙනවා. Haley's එකේ working capital loan හරි නැත්නම් අපි හිතමුකෝ මේ general loan facility එකකින් ගත්ත සල්ලි වගේක් තියෙනවා. Right? So like that, now Haley's is having certain amount of funds from different sources of loans. Sources of loans. From debenture issue, preferential issue, a general loan facility, like that, different fund is available. Now that fund is what we call a pool of fund. අපි හිතමු දැන් Haley's එකේ තියෙනවා 2 billion විතර වගේ pool of fund එකක්. Debentures වල එනවා. යරම්ම ඔක්කොම දැන් collection එකක් වගේ තියෙනවා. Out of that pool of funds which is already available within the business, let's say Haley's has decided to construct a small building taking 500 million. අර pool of funds 2 billion විතර තියෙනවා. ගත්ත loan facilities, ඊළඟට debenture issues, preferentials, ඒ ඔක්කොගේම ආපු සල්ලි තියෙනවා. Out of that money, they take 500 million out to do a construction. Now, that is what we call a general pool of funds. ඒක අපිට කියන්න බෑ specific කියලා. Now, nobody has given a loan specifically to a particular construction or a particular asset purchase, no. So, they had a general loan facilities, borrowing facilities available. Of that, they took 500 million to the construction part. Now, if such a thing is happening, we call it a general pool of funds. Right? So there are two types. One is the specific fund. That means the borrowing is given specifically for a particular construction or an asset acquisition. If it is out of the general pool of funds which are already available within the business, we say it is a general pool of funds. Now, accordingly, whether it's a specific fund or a general pool of fund, your capitalization of the borrowing cost will be a bit different, right? whether it's specific fund or a general pool of fund, your capitalization of the borrowing cost will be bit different. Clear? Right. Now we'll take first of all the specific fund. Specific fund, what will happen? Now, if it is a specific fund given specifically for a construction, specifically for a project, then you need to capitalize the net borrowing cost. You need to capitalize the net borrowing cost. What is the meaning of net borrowing cost? Right? Net borrowing cost means from the borrowing cost you need to deduct any investment income from the excess funds. Again, what? Now, Haley's has taken 5 billion loan from HNB. No? Haley's billion loan got an HNB to do the construction. Now on the first day itself, you don't be using the 5 billion itself. Haley's got 5 billion HNB construction. Now Haley's will not be using the entire 5 billion on a first day. Parliament 5 billion book use karanne. Right? They will be using it phase by phase. Now, until the usage, there will be some excess funds. 5 billion gatta, contracted 1 billion, 2 billion. Now, 3 billion is still remaining with them. Now, that they won't be keeping as it is now. They will be putting that to a fixed deposit. FD treasury bill, they are going to earn some interest income. Right? So, specifically, loan certain amount of funds they are utilizing, and the excess they might be investing in a fixed deposit or whatever, and they are earning an interest income. That is how it works. Right? In such a situation, right, the interest is calculated on the entire 5 billion. Loan 5 billion interest or use right? From the interest expense, you are going to deduct investment income, if any. Investment income, if any. So, thus the net interest income, net interest expense, Shuddha Naya Pirive, right? You are going to capitalize. Clear? You are going to capitalize. Okay? Right. Then we will come to the general pool of funds. General pool of funds. Now, in the general pool of funds, what will happen is, now there were already certain amount of funds available now. Of that you are taking the money on your requirement. Haley already 2 billion salli diyena. 2 billion එක loans වලින් එක එක facilities වලින් ආපු ඒවා. එතකොට ළමයි ඔයා ඕකෙන් ගන්න ඔයාගේ අවශ්‍යතාවය අනුව. The contractor is asking 200 million. You just take 200 million and give. He is asking another 300 million. You take in 300 million and you give. Out of the already available funds, you are taking the amount and you are giving that to the contractor. Then 2 billion හැදිලා තියෙන්නේ loans parking. 2 billion හැදිලා තියෙන්නේ loan, debenture, preference shares, like couple of items together. And when you are taking 500 million out of it, you don't know out of which you have taken. මේ debenture සල්ලි වලින් ආපු ඒවාද මේ 500ක් ගත්තේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් preference shares වල ආපු ඒවාද 500ක් ගත්තේ. එහෙම කියන්න බෑනේ. So what will happen is, guys, you are creating an weighted average interest cost. මේ මුළු වාගේ facility එකටම, for the entire facility, right, you calculate a weighted average interest cost or weighted average interest cost එක calc කරනවා. Right? Using that interest cost, you calculate the interest for that amount taken. අපි තමු loan 5කින් තමයි total value එක හැදිලා තියෙන්නේ. 5ට weight කරලා හදනවා interest cost එක. Interest rate එක. Using that rate for the amount you have taken, you calculate the interest cost. Now, in that case, you can't be deducting any interest income. කියන්න බෑනේ ළමයි. ඔයා ගත්ත 500 excess එකක් නෙවෙයිනේ. අර 2000 excess එකට ආපු interest income එකනේ. එතකොට you can't net it off. Right? So, in a general pool of funds, you are going to capitalize the gross interest. You are going to capitalize the gross interest calculated using the weighted average cost of funds. අපි ඒකට කියනවා capitalization rate එක කියලා. අර මුළු pool of funds වලම reflective interest rate එක, weighted average interest rate. we call it the capitalization rate. So using the weighted average cost of funds, you calculate a gross interest expense. Now here you can't deduct any interest income. That will be capitalized in a general pool of funds. Right? නිශ්චිත ණයක් නම් මොකද වෙන්නේ? Specific fund එකක් නම් නිශ්චිත අරමුදලක් නම් you get the interest expense, deduct any excess interest income, the net will be capitalized. Pool of funds වල මොකද වෙන්නේ? ගොඩක් ණය වලින් හැදිච්ච fund එකකින් අවශ්‍යතාවය අනුව ගන්න එකක් වෙන්නේ. So for the entire fund you calculate a weighted average interest cost. Using that rate you calculate the interest for the amount taken and you just capitalize. Can you deduct any investment income from there? No, you can't. Okay, right, are we clear? Okay guys, now we'll take a small note on what is this specific and what is this pool of funds, right? Please write your note on your keyboard, right? If a loan or borrowing has been taken for a specific purpose, it's called a specific fund, right? If the entity has obtained funds from multiple sources such as loans, ODs, then debentures, preference shares, such funds are called general pool of funds. Right, please take this down. Right, okay, like I told you guys, for the general pool of funds, for the entire fund we have to calculate a weighted average interest rate, which is what we call the capitalization rate. So there's a formula for us to do that. Now that's simply you take the total interest cost of that fund, total interest over the period you are going to consider, total interest over the period you are going to consider of that fund, and you take the total fund value, total borrowings value, total fund value, and you multiply by 100, right? Then that will give you the weighted average interest rate, right? Weighted average interest cost or the capitalization rate. You take the total borrowings of that fund, you take the total interest cost, and you multiply by 100. This is how you calculate the capitalization rate. Right, let's do some questions. Right, okay. Hero PLC has obtained 30 million 2-year loan from HSBC on constructing a new showroom. Project period is 12 months at an interest rate of 10%. On 1st of January 2008, another rupees 10 million, 3 months loan was obtained on 1st of Jan at the interest rate of 12% to manage the working capital requirements. Working capital cycle is 3 months. Company's financial year ends on 31st of December. Determine whether building and the working capital can be classified as qualifying assets. Right. I will take the first one. We got two items. One is the building, other one is the working capital. Now we know that building has a construction period of 12 months. Working capital has a construction period of 3 months. So building can be considered as a qualifying asset but the working capital cannot be considered as a qualifying asset. Because building has more than 6 months, right? More than 6 months, it will qualify to become a qualifying asset, right? Calculate the borrowing cost for the loans separately, right? We'll do the calculation of the borrowing cost separately. One is for the building, other one is the working capital, right? We'll take the loan value. We'll take the loan value 30 million and 10 million. 30 million and 10 million. 30 million and 10 million, right? And the interest rate is 10% and 12%. 10% and 12%. And the period we are looking at, so this is a 2-year loan, we are looking at up to 31st of December, so entirely 12 months will be there. But the working capital loan was for 3 months, so you have to calculate only for 3 months. Accordingly, you can calculate the interest. You can calculate the interest. So for this one, it will be 30 into 10% into 12 divided by 12, which will come to 3 million. Here it's 10 million multiplied by 12% multiplied by 3 divided by 12. It will come to 1.2 divided by 4. It will be 0.3 million. Right, 0.3 million. Okay, this is a calculation. Determine the recognition rule based on case 23. Right. Now, building is a qualifying asset. Working capital is not a qualifying asset. Building is a qualifying asset and working capital is not a qualifying asset. So, if it is a qualifying asset, the accounting treatment, this will be capitalized to the building. Capitalized to building. Capitalized to the building. Right, that means simply debited to building, and credited to cash or credited to interest payable. Now this 0.3 million is not a qualifying asset, no. So this will be charged to profit or loss. This will be charged to profit or loss. That means debited to P&L and credited to cash or interest payable. Right, that's the difference, right? So for a qualifying asset, you are going to capitalize that to the asset. Right. We'll do another question. Make it balanna walage uttara harida kiyala. Okay. Right. Question number 4. We'll see question number 4. Mega PLC has obtained rupees 10 million from HNB at an interest rate of 10%, specifically to fund the plant development project 1 year, 1st of Jan 2018. The total loan value is 10 million and 50% were invested in a fixed deposit for the first 6 months at an interest rate of 6%. On 30th June 2018, the fixed deposit got matured and those funds were utilized for the plant development project. Determine whether the plant can be classified as a qualifying asset. Calculate the cost of the borrowings and the investment income. As per case 23, determine whether borrowing cost to be capitalized. Right. Read the question again. Okay. Right, we'll deal with one by one separately. Okay, the first one, can we consider it to be a qualifying asset? Okay, this is a plant development. This plant, the period is 12 months. 12 months. Therefore, it's a qualifying asset. Qualifying asset. So first part, it's a qualifying asset. Second one, calculate the cost of borrowing and the investment income. Right, we'll first of all calculate the borrowing cost. So you know that the loan value is 10 million and the interest rate is 10%. Interest rate is 10% and the period we are looking at, it's from 1st of Jan, we will say the period is up to 31st of December for an example, right? So period is for like 1 year. Therefore the interest will come to 10 million into 10% into 12 divided by 12, which will come to 1 million, the interest. Then the investment income, so the fixed deposit is 5 million. The interest rate is 6%. And we are looking at a period of 6 months. So the interest income will come to 5 million into 6% into 6 divided by 12. It will come to 0.15 million. You are supposed to calculate the interest income and the interest expense and the investment income. That is the second part of the question, right? So which you have covered. As per LKS 23, determine the borrowing cost to be capitalized, right? So part 3 of the question. Now it's very clear, this is a specific fund. Right, the question is about a specific fund. So the borrowing cost 1 million, from that we need to deduct the investment income, which is 0.15 million. So 0.85 million, the net borrowing cost will be capitalized. Right, net borrowing cost 0.85 million will be capitalized. Since it's a specific fund, you have to capitalize the net borrowing cost. Right, so let's look at question number 5. Mini PLC has following banking facilities available within the company. There is already available within the company. That means it's a pool of funds. So there are like 3 bankers, Sampath, HSBC and Standard Chartered. The facility amounts are given and the interest rates are given to you, right? Out of these facilities available, Mini used rupees 50 million. So here you can see already available 100 million. Dentam facility ka 100 of that 100 they are using only 50. So out of these facilities available, Mini used 50 million to finance the building construction project commenced on 1st of January 2007, which was completed on 31st December 2007. So that means 12 months now. So it's a QA, qualifying asset. Further, during the year ended 31st December 2007, Mini earned an investment income of 1 million, right, by investing the excess funds in a fixed deposit. Now that we don't care. In a general pool of funds, we don't care about the investment income. What we care about is the finance cost. Right. Determine whether building can be classified as a qualifying asset. Calculate the capitalization rate. Explain the accounting treatment for investment income. Determine the cost to be capitalized as borrowing cost. Right. We'll deal with one by one separately. Determine whether the building can be classified as a QA. So this is question number 1. So this particular building, guys, it took 12 months now. Therefore, it's a qualifying asset. There's no issue on that. Secondly, you have been asked to calculate the capitalization rate, right? We'll try to calculate the capitalization rate. We'll prepare a small table. The source, the amount, the interest rate and the interest, right? Interest rate and the interest. Here sometimes you might need the period. We'll put the period as well, right? We'll put the period as well. Period and the interest, right? So we got three bankers, right? We got Sampath, we got Standard Chartered and HSBC. And the loan figures are 30, 50 and 20. 30, 50 and 20. Interest rates are 10, 10.2, 10.10. 10%, 10.2% and 10.1%. Right? Okay. The period is there for the entire year. It's there for the entire year. There's no worries on that. And the interest expense, we'll say 30 million into 10% is 3. 50 million into 10.2% is 5.1. 20 million into 10.1% is 2.02. So that will come to 10.12. So now you can calculate the capitalization rate. Capitalization rate, now you can calculate, right? It's very easy, right? Total interest, you take the total interest, that divided by the total borrowing, that divided by the total borrowing, multiplied by 100. So total interest is 10.12, no. Total loans are 100, no. Multiplied by 100, which will come to 10.12%, right? This is your capitalization rate, 10.12%. Okay, right. Right. Now we have covered the second part. Thirdly, you have been asked to explain the accounting treatment for the investment income, right? You have been asked the accounting treatment for the investment income. So this is the third part. So guys, this investment income. Now what we know is, right, since it's general pool of funds, since it's general pool of funds, interest income cannot be capitalized. Right? It will be recognized in profit or loss as an other income. As another income, right? Okay, so it's general pool of funds, no, so you can't capitalize, you can't net it off, right? You are going to recognize in the profit or loss, right? Fourth, you have to calculate the borrowing cost to be capitalized. Now it's quite easy, right? So 50 million 1st of Jan to 31st of December, right? So let's calculate the borrowing cost to be capitalized. Borrowing cost to be capitalized, right? So we'll take the amount of the borrowing, which is 50 million, multiplied by the capitalization rate. Capitalization rate, which is 10.12%, multiply. And you have to take the period, which is 1 year, no? Alright, now you can get the answer 50 into 0.1012, 5.06 million. So this will be capitalized. This will be capitalized. Right? This will be capitalized. Okay. Right. Okay. Now, so we have discussed few questions on the borrowing cost, right? We have discussed few questions on borrowing cost. What we are going to learn now is when it comes to the borrowing cost capitalization. We know that if there's a qualifying asset which takes substantial period of time to get ready for its intended use or sale, then for that construction period, for that creation period, for that invention period, for that development period, you can capitalize the borrowing cost. එතකොට ණය ගැනුම් පිරිවැය සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කමක ඒ සුදුසුකම් ලබන වත්කම නිර්මාණය වන ඉදි කෙරෙන කාලය පුරාවට ප්‍රාග්ධනිත කළ හැක. Right? Not beyond that. Now you should know when to start borrowing cost capitalization, when to stop borrowing cost capitalization. අපි කොයි වෙලේද පටන් ගන්නෙ කොයි වෙලේද නතර කරන්නේ. When to start and when to stop. Right? So let me teach you when to start and when to stop. අපි ඒකවත් එක්ක කතා කරමු. When to start and when to stop. Okay. Right. Now guys, let me put it like this. Right. Okay. When to start, right? We are looking at the borrowing cost capitalization, the starting point. When to start? Now, for you to start borrowing cost capitalization, you need to ensure three things. Three things should be there. There are three criterias. One criteria is what we call the expenses. Second criteria is what we call the borrowing cost. Third criteria is what we call the activities. What does it say? Now, for you to start the borrowing cost capitalization, the expenses on the construction, expenses of the creation, expenses of the development should have already incurred. Right? So for you to start the borrowing cost capitalization, you need to ensure the development has started, construction has started. Right? Then only you are incurring the expenditure, no? Right? So you need to ensure that expenses on the construction, the development, the creation has been incurred. That is the first thing. Second thing, for you to capitalize the borrowing cost should have been incurred. So for you to start capitalizing the borrowing cost should have been incurred. That's the second one. Borrowing cost should have been incurred. The third one, activities necessary to create the asset, construct the asset, develop the asset to the intended use or sale shall be in progress. Activities necessary to create the asset, develop the asset, construct the asset to the intended use or sale should be in progress. එකනේ ණය ගැනුම් පිරිවැයක් ප්‍රාග්ධනිත කරන්න නම් මේක මේ ඉදිකිරීම් නිර්මාණ කටයුතු ටික ආරම්භ වෙලා තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ ඇක්ටිවිටීස් පටන් අරන් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. වියදම් දරලා තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ණය ගැනුම් පිරිවැය දරලා තියෙන්න ඕනේ. So all three activities should be there. Right? All three criteria should be there. If all three are there, now you can start. Now that's the starting point, no? Then the next one is when to stop. Borrowing cost capitalization Borrowing cost capitalization, when to stop. When to stop. Right, now you have started, so you keep on capitalizing and capitalizing. It should end somewhere, right? You can't be capitalizing forever. Sadakal make capitalize kara kara yanda, right? You should stop somewhere. When to stop? When to stop? Right? Now, the point of stopping the borrowing cost capitalization will stop. Borrowing cost capitalization will stop when the construction or the creation or the development is substantially completed. When the asset is substantially completed. When the asset is substantially completed, that means if the asset is almost ready, there can be some minor modifications, minor developments, administration work can be there. But if the asset is almost ready, stop it. Stop the capitalization. Now charge it to P&L. Then I started to construct a building. It takes 1 year. So by 1st of Jan, right, I have completed the expenses, borrowing cost and activities. The criteria is ready. So I start capitalizing. Now let's say towards 31st of December, asset is almost ready. My building is almost done. My construction is almost finished. I have to do some minor things, right? I have to do some, minor interior decoration maybe, maybe some administration work that I am going to do the opening. My auspicious movement will come within 1 month later. Right, I have to put some curtains or whatever. Minor things can be there, but now the building is almost completed, no? So once the almost completion is there, you have to stop capitalizing. Thereafter start charging it to P&L. So today වත්කම ළමයි සාපේක්ෂව සැලකිය යුතු මට්ටමකින් construction එක ඉවර වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් වාගේ creation එක ඉවර වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් දැන් ඇති capitalize කරා. දැන් P&L එකට charge කරන්න කියලා තමයි කියන්නේ. ඒ 100% perfectly ඉවර වෙනකල් ඉන්න එපා කියලා කියන්නේ. ඔක්කොම curtain ටිකක් දාලා පීත්ත පටිය කපනකල් ඉන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. හරිද? ඔයා ඔයාගේ building එක දැන් හදලා ඉවරයි නම් ඔයාලට තේරෙනවා නම් බැලු බැලමට දැන් ඉවරයි කියලා දැන් ඇති. දැන් borrowing cost එක P&L එකට දාන්න පටන් ගන්න. හදනකල් දුන්නානේ. හැමදාම එහෙම chance දෙන්න බෑනේ. Right? Okay? Right. Now you know when to start and when to stop. When to start and when to stop the borrowing cost capitalization. Right, now we'll see in between what will happen. Now if the active development is temporarily suspended, what will happen to the borrowing cost? Again then during the construction period, the construction or the development or the creation can be temporarily stopped. තාවකාලික නතර වෙන්න පුළුවන් අවස්ථා තියෙනවා ළමයි. Now, when we start a building construction, that doesn't mean every day you are going to construct නේ. හැමදාම construction එක යන්නේ නැහනේ. There can be situations 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month the construction is temporarily stopped for different reasons. We have a problem. Okay, if the construction is temporarily halted, temporarily stopped for a period, during that 1 month or 2 month, what should we do to the borrowing cost? Are we going to charge it to P&L or are we going to continue the capitalization? එහෙනම් ඔයා building එක හදාගෙන යනවා. මාසයක් වැඩ නැහැ. මාසයක් පොඩ්ඩක් නැවැත්තුවා. Now during that 1 month borrowing cost, what we are trying to do? Are we going to keep on capitalizing or we are going to charge to profit or loss? So ප්‍රශ්නයක් එනවනේ. If the active development is suspended, what we should do? Now the standard is pretty nice, right? Pretty nice. They are giving you a very valuable guidance. They ask, okay, if the active development is suspended, මේ හදන එක නැවතිලා තියෙනවා නම්, why is that? Why? ඇයි නැවතුනේ? Why is that? What is the reason? Is it due to a planned reason? or unplanned one? Was it something expected or was it something unexpected? Is it something within management control or is it something beyond management control? They are asking for the reason. They are asking for the reason, right? They are asking for the reason. Was it something planned or unplanned? Was it something expected or unexpected? Was it something controllable or uncontrollable? Right. Now, this is a very, very classic situation, very epic situation. Now think about, I'll give you a few examples. You know guys, let's say you will have started the construction and you are continuing the construction, and you obviously know that during the festival season you have to give leaves for your employees now. Let's say during the month of April you have to give 1 or 2 weeks leaves for the employees. During the period of Christmas and New Year you have to give 1 or 2 weeks, 1 week leaves for the employees. You have to give. That is a festival season and the employees are demanding their leaves, and it's something that you know that you have to give them the leaves because they have to be with their families, right? So that when you are doing the construction, if the festival season is due, you know that it's something expected, right? It is something expected, you know that it is something you are planning for it, right? You know that yeah, anyway you have to, plan for that leave, right? Therefore, when you are planning the original, your construction period, let's say 12 months you have planned, right? Let's say the original construction period you thought from 1st of Jan to 31st of December, right? 1st of Jan to 31st of December, you know that in April month there will be like 1 week leave. You know that in the month of December there will be like 1 week leave. That is something known. And you have planned it for the construction, right? And let's say, what if the employees have started doing a protest? We need a wage hike. Now the living cost has increased and you need to pay us more. Unless we don't work, we are going to protest. We are going to go for a strike. Now, if such a thing happen, is it planned? Are we planning for strikes and the protests? No, right? Are we expecting the strikes and the protests? No, right? Is it within our control? No, right? Now what will happen? Let's say the employees striked for 2 months. They said we won't work until you give us a pay hike. Until you give us good food, we are going to strike. Now that 2 months was unexpected. As a result of the 2 months, let's say my building completion went up to, let's say, 1st of March, right? So my construction period lagged with another 2 months because of some unexpected, unplanned, beyond management control reason. Right. Now, there are certain things which are planned within the 12 months, which are expected within the 12 months, which is something that you can control or something you know. If it is something planned, expected within the management control, it can be planned or expected or within the management control, you can continue the borrowing cost capitalization. You can continue the borrowing cost capitalization, right? But if it is something unexpected, unplanned, and you cannot control, now that will lead to an increase in your capitalization period. No, that you can't allow. We originally thought only 12 months, so now it is taking 14 months now. That extra 2 months we can't allow, no. So therefore, that strike period or the protest period, right, you have to suspend the borrowing cost capitalization and during that period the borrowing cost will be charged to profit or loss. Profit or loss. එහෙනම් දැන් ඔයා ඔරිජිනලි ප්ලෑන් කරේ කන්ස්ට්‍රක්ෂන් එක 12 month නම් ඕක ඇතුලේ අර ඔයා දැනුවත්ව ඔයාගේ ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් එක නතර වෙන තැන් ටික ඔයා ප්ලෑන් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඒ පීරියඩ් එකට borrowing cost එක නැවතුණත් කැපිටලයිස් කරන්න දෙනවා. ඒක ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ. ෆෙස්ටිවල් සීසන් එනවා, මහ වැහි නිසා මේක පොඩ්ඩක් කරගන්න බැරි වෙනවා. ඒ ප්ලෑන් කරපු ඇස්සක් ප්ලෑන් කරලා මේ කාලේ සතියක් දෙකක් අපිට පොඩ්ඩක් ඩිලේ වෙයි. ඒව දන්නවා. අන්ප්ලෑන්ඩ් වෙහිත් වෙනවනේ. ඒව නේ මම කියන්නේ මේ ප්ලෑන්ඩ් ඒවා. හරිද? ඒතකොට ඔයා දන්න නිකන් එක්ස්පෙක්ටඩ් ඒව ටික අවුලක් නැහැ. අන්එක්ස්පෙක්ටඩ් එනවා. ඔන්න එකපාරට බෙන්ගාල බොක්ක කැළඹිලා මහා වැස්සක් ඇවිල්ලා ඔන්න පොඩ්ඩක් කන්ස්ට්‍රක්ෂන් එක සතියක් විතර නතර වෙනවා. those are unexpected. Employees strike කරනවා unexpected. Right? So unexpected things you can't let capitalize in the borrowing cost. Unexpected, unplanned, beyond management control, then for that period the borrowing cost shall be charged to profit or loss.